Good afternoon, everybody. This is Haley Huberty here. I'm the Professional Development Manager at Creative Learning Systems. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a company that provides individualized project-based learning spaces with the furniture, technology, kits, training, resources that school needs to implement student-directed project-based learning in their school. So today we're going to cover classroom management in the digital space as you guys are transitioning to kind of teaching from home and setting up learning experiences for your kids in that digital realm. You're going to have some different classroom management challenges and different tools that you may use to help with those. For those of you who are called in, you're automatically muted, but if you have a question, you can click on the little raise your hand button, or you can post a question in the chat and I'll keep an eye on those and answer your questions as they come up. I'm going to share my screen. All right, perfect. So I wanted to start off looking at this quote. Great teachers focus not on compliance, but on connections and relationships. We know as teachers that building relationships is one of the most important things in our classrooms, and it really does prevent a lot of behavior management issues by having strong relationships with our kids. So it's something that looks very different in a digital space. You know, you can't watch a kid come into your room and, see that something is off. You don't have those conversations to overhear or those in-person interactions to figure out what's going on with them. So it's going to be really important to continue to focus on building those relationships and ensuring that you're spending time continuing to connect with your kids on a personal level. Structure some time in your day to check in with your students kind of one-on-one. That can be, on the work that you're watching as they complete. It can be through, a chat on Google Classroom. However you are able to communicate with your students, spend some time checking in to see how they're doing, not only, on schoolwork, but how is their family doing? Are they able to go out and play? How are they staying busy? Just those kinds of things, checking in with them. All right, let me move the chat over here. If you haven't already, sending out a survey on what their interests are, new things that they're learning about or want to learn about is great to make connections with what they're doing online. And taking notes of those is going to be helpful moving forward. If you have a kid who's struggling to stay engaged in that digital space, pulling in some of those interests can be really powerful. Keep track of their needs. So if you notice a student is, struggling with some of the reading materials, then you may want to jot that down and make sure that you add in some more materials, resources kind of in your library for those students to access so they can be more independent. And really just make sure that you're giving your kids the resources and support so that they can learn and grow. And you're there as a caring support for them throughout this time where they've got to take a little bit more ownership over their learning because they are at home and you're not there to help them face to face. So there are some different kind of components of classroom management that you'll still have to deal with in the digital space. Setting expectations is important. Providing students with various types of support for various reasons. Dealing with distractions. This is something that your students are going to have to manage a lot more than you'll be able to help them manage. It may be helpful to give them a possible schedule. If you're a K-5 teacher and you see them for every subject, it may be a breakdown of how they could spend a little bit of time with each subject so that they're not getting overwhelmed with the amount of work or time to complete something. I'm going to show you guys a resource that incorporates the Pomodoro technique. And that's where you chunk periods of work time and breaks. And that can be really helpful for students so that they don't get burnt out while working on assignments as they become more independent and kind of getting into their own flow of working independently. And then another thing you may want to keep in mind to help kind of eliminate some of those distractions is what the student's learning environment is at home. if they've picked the kitchen table where everyone is working and everyone is moving around, that could be pretty distracting. But you can empower students to kind of design their own little learning environment, whether it's a corner of their room where they have a desk and a chair set up and they have a sign on their door that says, school in session, I'm working. But you can send those suggestions out to the kids, to parents, just so that they're aware of how they can set themselves up for success. Quality of work is something that you're going to have to continue to monitor and support kids with. And then peer interactions, which they're at home. Some of them may be stuck in their house with either no siblings or no ability to go outside. So they're going to be craving some peer interaction. So instead of, kids will eventually figure out how to comment on their assignments and talk to each other. But if you set up some spaces for them to interact with each other in a social capacity, and you can participate in that as well, it gives them that outlet and the interaction that they're craving. And that could be a Padlet where you ask different questions each day and they kind of share their responses and learn about each other. It could be, a little break space that is a discussion room or a forum where they can share what they're doing. You can also even do some team building activities. And that could be, you and your partner, here's a scavenger hunt, go find out some information or some fun new facts. And then they have to collaborate, through a Google Doc. But then they still are working together and they're getting that group work component. And then just some fun activities, like a lot of schools, a lot of elementary schools start with a morning meeting. A lot of high schools, you've got that homeroom time where kids can just chat. So setting up some time where everyone can touch base and talk about what they're doing, maybe learn something new, have an interesting conversation. Would you rather lick peanut butter off of someone's toe or, jump in the water with a shark? Fun things like that, just to get them engaged and keep them engaged and interacting with each other is important. So with setting expectations, as I mentioned, structuring work time is going to be something that may be challenging for some of your students, and it may be totally new for them. Some of them may be used to just doing it at school, and you guys as the teachers help them out with that. So some resources that you may want to share with them. Let's see, one second. So this is a Pomodoro timer, and I'm going to set it up again. But it's a 25-minute timer. So kids work for 25 minutes. Then after 25 minutes, they take a 5-minute break. So as you can see, there's single Pomodoro. They take a short break. They do this 4 times, and then they take a longer break. So it's really helpful to kind of keep them focused for that 25 minutes. Then they get that brain break, not school related. They can go take, a lap around their house, or they can go pet their dog, or, get a quick game in on their Game Boy, and then hop back into work. But that way they can pace it out. They see that end, that finish line for each work period, and it can be really helpful to keep them motivated. All right. Oops, sorry. Okay. So another thing that you'll want to do is set up some expectations for how they're going to get support from you or from peers. One thing that you may want to consider is the format and kind of the platform that they're using to do their work. I'd recommend picking something that really lends itself to interaction and collaboration. Most schools now are Google Schools or like Schoology. Of course, Google, you can add comments, and that's really helpful. One thing that you can do is you can add a comment to a slide, a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, and if you add the @ sign and then type in someone's username, I would teach your kids to do this, have them do the @ sign and then your username, and then ask their question. And that will send you an email every time that they do that. That way you know when they need help and you don't have to constantly go into the assignments they're working on. But that's, the way that they can kind of get your attention, let you know that they need some support. Something else you want to set up is where they can find all their resources. It's going to be best if they have some kind of central hub where they're locating their assignments, where you're doing your main communication. If that's email, because you're middle school, high school, and your kids have email, or if that's Schoology or Google Classroom, and then linking everything there makes it really easy for kids to find things and not get confused and frustrated with locating all those materials. Something else you'll definitely want to have a conversation about is online etiquette. And if you use any digital tools in your classroom, you may have started to have these conversations, but students are going to be frequently talking to you, asking for help, talking to peers, getting feedback from peers. So talking about what is appropriate is really helpful. What is a appropriate response to a teacher to ask for help? But then also just, the typical, like saying nice things that, don't say anything you wouldn't say to someone's person. So or to their face. So those kinds of reminders and kind of expectations, setting out those ground rules is really good. I linked a couple of resources here. I will be sending out this PowerPoint to all the attendees once the recording has finished processing at the end of the webinar. So you guys will get this, but BrainPop has really good videos about digital etiquette. Common Sense Media has really good ones for middle school and high school about being responsible online and how to communicate to others effectively. So supporting students is going to be really helpful just to make sure they stay engaged and motivated and continue to feel confident, even though they now kind of feel like this isolated bubble potentially. And that's why that, personal communication, maintaining those relationships is going to be really important, as well as making sure that you have all of the support. So giving individual feedback is really helpful. You can also get feedback from your kids just by having them fill out a Google form or a SurveyMonkey every day. Check in how they're doing. You could ask, a general question and just see what they're up to, as well as what have you made progress with, what questions do you have, what resources or supports do you have. Those are all things that you can ask in that kind of daily communication. It'd also be a good idea to set up some office hours. Luckily, Zoom is actually offering, they are offering their resource, their platform to teachers. So you could set up a Zoom meeting from, 2 to 3 every day. And as kids have questions or want to check in or talk with you and discuss something they're encountering, then they can join that Zoom meeting. And then you have your whole class potentially coming in at different times. But letting them know that you're available is great. And then getting to see you face to face and continuing to build those relationships. You may also consider setting up some peer support groups. So small groups of kids who either work well together or who have diverse strengths so they can support each other, and having a space where they can communicate, whether that's on a Google Doc, on a Padlet, on Seesaw, like any platform that you use that can support that. Coming up with digital resources is also going to be really important. You'll want to consider, your wide spectrum of needs and abilities of your students, and make sure that you kind of pull resources that will support all of them, and then putting it into some place where it's easily accessible for them. Google folder, a website where it has all the links, or just a document with all the links, or a post in whatever management system you use. Now that students are going to be learning pretty independently, with some guidance from you and some resources from you, they may be using the internet a lot more to find information to support their project. And so talking about plagiarism and copyright laws is really important if that hasn't come up yet, just to make sure that they're not copying, pasting information, you know, and using all of that appropriately. And so there's some resources there about copyright laws, about plagiarism, about fair use, all of that stuff linked there. So quality of work is something that you'll also, you know, continuously support your students with. Just like in the classroom, you know, you'll give feedback, you'll want to show them exemplars of, you know, what is high quality work, and you'll likely use rubrics or some kind of assessment to assess your students at the end of the project. And those may look a little bit different in format, but for feedback, one tool that is cool to use, and let me switch my screens real quick. So there is a Chrome extension called Kaizena. So you can see that it's over here up in this corner, Kaizena. And you can go to the Chrome store and add it. You can also just Google Kaizena. I linked the actual website on the PowerPoint, but it allows you, I just opened it in this add-on, and it allows you to add text comments. You can add a voice message too. So if you're trying to explain, you know, giving feedback on a writing assignment and you want to explain tone or how something flows, then you could add a voice message of reading it and how, you know, a different sentence or a different word might change how that writing comes across. You can also add rubrics and link lessons. So that's another feature that you can put in there, which is pretty cool. But it's super easy. You know, I added just a quick comment here for a student, but it is a little more diverse than just adding plain comments in Google Docs, where you just have text. So that's a free resource. It does connect to Google Slides, although that is a paid version. I think it's like $6 a month. So if you and your students use Google Slides a lot and it's worth it, and you know, maybe you get some money from your school to adapt to e-learning, then you could totally go for it. Another tool to keep in mind is there's a Chrome extension called Doctopus, and the other one is Gubrick, and they actually work together, and they're like super advanced rubric tools where you can embed a rubric within a Google Doc, Google Slide, Google Sheet, and give pretty good feedback. I think you can also add voice comments there. It's definitely more robust, and it's a slightly more complicated process to add it, but I would definitely recommend checking that out. That's Gubrick and Doctopus, like octopus, but DOC at the beginning. Those are other tools that can help you kind of give some feedback on documents that your students are working on. Providing exemplars, that's something that you could share mid-project if you have some students who are doing really well and there's components that you want to show off and say, hey, this is high quality. These are the pieces of it that are really great. You know, look at yours and see how you can lift, elevate the level of your work. It can also be attached to the original assignment if it's helpful and, you know, doesn't give too much away. Rubrics is something else that you will want to potentially set up, depending on how you're assessing your students. If you're doing project-based learning, then you'll want to use rubrics. I added in a little screenshot of the rubric that we use with our students in Smart Labs. Really focuses on those big essential skills of, you know, developing a project plan, documenting your work, presenting, and all those other components. And our students self-assess, and then the teacher also assesses them. And they have a conversation about what that looks like. I linked under here, Edutopia has some really good recommendations for kind of setting up a good online learning environment. So that's just an extra resource for you guys to access the curriculum, because I know a lot of you have seen that we're offering our portions of our curriculum that you can use to engage your students in online learning. So you can email support@clsonline.com to request access. I linked the form, and then I also added in, when you close your Zoom session, it should bring up a window that will lead you straight to the form where you can request access. And then you'll get the 8-week score. A score is what we call our scope and sequence of engagements. And so it's all digital engagements that kids can go through. They'll also send you login information for our curriculum site and some resources to understand how it's structured. For those of you who were unable to see the webinar yesterday, I will add a link to the recording on that. Because Zoom has opened up their platform to a lot of people for free, the recordings are processing pretty slow. So I will get that out to you as soon as I can, and as soon as this recording has finished processing. Tomorrow, we're going to cover authentic digital assessment. On Friday, we're going to just go through some really good activities that you could pull in to supplement your either online curriculum or whatever you're teaching, and some resources to help do that. And then on Monday, March 23rd, we're going to talk about adapting to digital learning. So really just, checking your expectations, talking about those components that are going to be different and maybe challenging, and how to process those throughout this transition and potentially totally new environment. So we hope you join us for those. I'm going to open it up now to questions. So if you guys have any questions, please either raise your hand or send it in the Zoom chat. All right. I guess I give you a lot to think about. Well, you guys have an awesome afternoon. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can email us at support@clsonline.com or academics@clsonline.com. Either one is fine. If there's anything else we can support you with, any other recommendations, resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here for you guys, and we want to support you, in this new adventure. All right, well, you guys have an awesome afternoon, and I hope to see many of you on our webinar tomorrow.